Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today, this afternoon. Last week, I spoke about self-love and what it meant to me. And this week, I'm going to be talking about self-love as well, but I'm going to go deeper into it. Okay, so I started last week with the definition that Google gave of self-love, and that was regard for one's own well-being, which is true to a certain extent, but you can still not know your worth. Because Google definition, once again, was regard for one's well-being and happiness. So you can still not know your worth. Okay, so you have to break down self-love. Self-love is a compound word, and I'm sure everyone knows what a compound word, but however, it's when two words are combined together and it creates a new meaning. Okay, so in order to truly understand self-love, you have to understand what both words mean. Okay, so again, I went to Google and I Googled the definition of self, and it gave a person's essential being that distinguishes them from others. Okay? And then the definition of love Google gave was an intense feeling of deep affection. Okay, so I began to think about self-love to myself. As I stated last week, when I didn't know who I was or what my worth was at that time, my definition of happiness was different, My definition of happiness back then, listen, y'all, it was to look and feel good. I based my happiness upon money, materialistic things, or just the feeling of anything that made my flesh feel good. So I loved being intoxicated, just being transparent. So pretty much, I made my flesh feel good. I made my flesh happy by feeding itself the cravings that it wanted. But in reality, I was killing myself spiritually, physically, literally, and mentally. And, how can I love myself if I was killing myself? So I began to think that, the Google definition, when it said regards for one's own well-being and happiness, if you don't love yourself, then you can truly not give yourself happiness. See, back then I didn't know my worth, so I gave myself what made me feel good for that moment, even though it was killing me. So how can I love someone that I don't know? Okay, so in Matthew 22 and 39, it was a conversation pretty much between, I'm going to paraphrase, the Sadducees had questions. They was asking Jesus questions or whatnot. And then, God pretty much responded to them you don't know the scripture, or do you not know the power of God? So, then he went down, I'm going to just read it over here. And then he went down, and then the Pharisees heard how the Sadducees was put to silence. And one of the Pharisees had asked a question. In chapter 22, verse 36, the Pharisee asks, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? And then Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. Okay, so when he said that, he said something very powerful after it as well. In verse 39, it reads, And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. So, I started talking to myself, and I was like, wow, like, if you don't know who you are enough to love yourself, you can't properly love the next person. That's why it's important to find out who you are in God, because he created us. It's important to know where you are at with yourself at this current time when you're trying to find yourself. Because if you can see your life for what it is, and if you can see that your actions are abnormal, then you can be like, hey, like, this is not right. Like, hey, I grew up in this abnormal environment, but I know this isn't right. Like, when you can see yourself and see that your behavior and, the lifestyle you was living is not right, then that's a step one to self-love, because now you can see that something has to change. Okay, for an example, I grew up in a single mother household. I seen a lot of things. I seen my mother do drugs. I seen my mom passed out on the bed several nights. I seen her club. I seen her with different men as well. And I also got verbally abused. When it first started happening to me, I knew it was not right. Like, I knew that something deep down inside was not right about it. But when you come to think about it, I knew it wasn't right in the beginning. But being under the same household for several years, repeating the same behavior, even though it was not normal to me in the beginning, it became normal to me. So my abnormal was normal to me. So the verbal abuse went right over my head. So now, I'm a young adult. I'm out of the house at this time in my life. So I used to listen. Now when I think about it, I used to listen to these songs and, that degraded me. They degrade women, period. They call you a bad B, and y'all know what the B word is. And, even though bad is not always considered bad, like, I can be like, girl, you got on a bad dress. You got on some bad shoes. Because bad is not always bad. It can be used as in you're that chick, you're that woman. However, the word behind it is the word that degrades you. So, like being around friends and stuff like that, we don't know our worth. We're so blinded that when we talk to each other, we refer to each other as the B word, And it becomes normal because that's the way we talk. We're not seeing that we are literally degrading ourselves now. That means that you do not love yourself if you allow that. I wish someone would call me out my name, call me the B word, because I don't play that. I don't joke like that anymore. Like, I know who I am, and I know who God said I am. So it's just like, I was just blinded by the little things, verbal abuse, and how I referred to myself. Because now it's so popular in society to be called a bad bee. It's so popular to be called these names. Now in the music, men are referring to their ladies as, that word. And everyone is now comfortable, So once again, the abnormal is now normal. So, I'm sorry, y'all. My notes all over the place. Okay, so I'm sorry. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to Matthew 22, chapter 22 and verse 39. Okay, so when he said, and the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. So if you don't know yourself, you're not going to be able to love yourself correctly. And if you don't love yourself, you're not going to be able to love your neighbor correctly. So it's like sometimes, you can hurt yourself and be blinded by it. You're so used to hurting yourself to the point that it becomes a behavior, as I said before. The abnormal is now normal to you. So you may treat a person, the way that you treat yourself, not knowing that you don't love yourself because, you used to this. This is me, so I'm treating you like this. Like, for an example, growing up in a broken household, you never had no affection. Nobody ever hugged you. Nobody ever kissed you. Nobody ever said, I love you, or any of those things. So if you come across something, you would not know how to receive that, because even though it's really normal to show affection to your loved ones and to people. But being that you never got it, it's abnormal. So it's like So you was never taught how to love yourself, and it was never poured into you. For an example, a woman, and I witnessed this with my own eyes. A woman will get beat by a man and stay by his side. Literally get beat. Black eyes, get drugged through the mud and still be there. Because sometimes, your love language begins to change. So if this woman is getting beat repeatedly over and over, others on the outside may be looking like, what's wrong with her? But in her eyes, she sees something different. He beating me because he loved me. Because 1 minute he beat her, and then the next second, he's showering her with gifts. So her mind is not comprehending what it really is, because the gifts is blinding. Gifts are normally used to express your love in a way for another individual. Okay, so sometimes that can be a person love language. That's why people be like, here's a gift, a token of love, because sometimes gifts are used for that. And I can honestly say that today, knowing who I am and knowing who God said I am, now I can truly look at what I used to be and see, you're not even in your place. You don't know who you really are. When you truly want to love yourself, you're going to be who God said to be. Who God told you are, that's who you're going to try to be. You're not going to try to be the next person. For instance, I was never trying to be Alexis Middlebrooks. I just showed my real name. If you never went to school with me and you wasn't in my personal life, you probably never knew my name, because my name on social media used to be PG Lex for years, because I never wanted nobody to really know me. Not just that, is PG Lex was this person that society made up. Society loved PG Lex. I'm not saying everybody, but it's more so that's what I was known by, and the way I used to carry myself. I didn't carry myself like a woman who knew who she was. I carried myself like a harlot. I carried myself seeking for attention. I was vulnerable at that state of my life. So it's just you're not going to try to be anyone else but who God told you to be. So now it's just yes, I used to be that, but now I'm someone else. You get what I'm saying? So living for God now, is everything that I am is in here. In order for me to be that virtuous woman, everything is in here. The person I'm striving to be, this is where I get it from. And I can truly say, you can be blinded by a lot of things. Because as I stated previously, in my past, the way I grew up, it was normal to see what I seen. When I walk outside the door, I was used to seeing people on drugs. I may see, I don't like calling people that, but a known crackhead. I knew that they did crack, but they were still good people. We'll speak. I seen these people. It was normal for me, to see men gambling up under a tree. It was normal for me to see women walking down the road with booty shorts. Like, all of this, arguments, all that was normal. And, it's not like I was able to escape anything. So every day, when I get up, I go to school, I'm walking through this neighborhood, I see the same thing over and over. I get off the bus, I'm seeing the same thing repeatedly. And, even my friend's mother, I seen the same thing in their home. So it's more so like, this is a normal life, even though it wasn't normal. But when you're so used to your environment, you sometimes take up things that you're not supposed to. So I took up so many bad habits. Not even just, the things that people highlight the most, as far as like drinking and all of that. I took upon a bad attitude. I took upon not knowing how to be able to communicate and all of that. So that kind of, hindered me on how to love myself, because here it is, I'm so used to being this way for all of these years. It's just like, hey, Alexis, like, I promise you, if it had not been for God to put them thoughts, and I'm always going to say he put the thoughts in my head, because I know so many people who literally live in the same lifestyle I used to live, and that's stuck. Like, they're stuck in it. And I look at it as if God would have never put the thoughts in my head to wake up from that very moment, that I still would have been stuck in that repeated cycle. The generational curses and etc. All of that, like, I would have been stuck there. So I thank God for putting the thoughts in my head to show me, like, Alexis, you worth more than this. And, I'm always going to thank him for that. And now being saved, it's just like, when I first came into the church, like, of course, and I said it before, like, of course I knew, like, certain things that we highlight the most, like, okay, you're not supposed to be having sex outside of marriage, because for one, it can degrade you as a woman, because you are valuable. Like, you do not have to open your legs. You do not have to do none of that. Like, literally, because society has blinded people to the point where they feel like, I heard the little saying is common, I got to see how it is before I actually lock in, like, before I get married. And that's not how it's supposed to be. So a lot of females, they get that in the mindset, like, well, I'm going to open my legs, he say he like me, and you let the words get you all tied up, and then you start feeling him, and then boom, child, he done got your cookie, and he ran off with your cookie, it's gone, and now you literally stuck, and you're crying, and you're sad, So I had to get out of society, because society will really mess up your mind, and it will have you so far gone from your worth that you feel like it's impossible to shake back. You'll feel like it's impossible, to move forward. Like, I'm a witness to it. So it's just like, I knew that keeping my legs closed would add more value to me, because I don't have to do anything. I'm not saying, like, I am who I am. Like, God, you know what God said I am? Like, that's the mindset you got to have. And, like, now it's like, I knew all that. Like, okay, drinking, this, that, and the third, like, blase, blase. I'm not supposed to be doing none of that. Okay, so I got that out of coming out of the world, okay, because I was doing it for so long that it was just like, it was tiring. But when you truly come in, like, when I came into the church, it was more so, I didn't just come into the church because of what happened to me. I wanted to give my life to God, but I just didn't know how to go about it. And so when I came to the church, I knew that I couldn't do a lot of things. I knew where I was at in life. I knew I couldn't pray. I knew that I didn't love myself the utmost, but I'm trying to learn how to love myself. Like, I knew where I was at. So I just was patient with myself, because sometimes we can become impatient because we find ourselves falling right back into the same habits. But you really have to understand that, when you're so used to something, it's hard to break away. When you done gave this flesh something that it like, child, that thing gonna crave. It's going to crave. Literally, like, I don't smoke no more. I don't drink no more. I don't have sex no more. But this flesh had it before. And this flesh know how it feels. So when you so used to living a certain life, I'm not saying it's not going to be a fight, but it can be done, you know? So now it's just like when I came into the church, okay, I knew where I was at, but I knew it was more to me. I knew I was worth some, even though I couldn't see it all the way. And you have to believe that. You have to really put those thoughts into you as well. You know, you have to speak to yourself. So I came into the church and I didn't know all that. But as I began to stay in the church, you know, I'm trying to grasp onto things. And I'm like, okay, I used to look up to so-and-so in the world. And they ain't do nothing but get me into more trouble. It didn't do nothing. I had no restrictions on my life. I did not respect time. I did not respect myself as a person. You know, I degraded myself. Not even let alone what people did to me. It's what I did to myself. Sometimes we will blame others. But honestly, despite your situation, you do not have to degrade yourself as a woman at all. So it's just like, you know, I'm in the church and now I have different role models. You know, I can look up to this woman of God and I can be like, well, okay. I know you always got to start somewhere. And I know she just didn't wake up and become that woman of God. So I know it's a process. So this self-love journey, you know, it can be tough, but it's a reward. Just like a plant, you know, you planting that thing, you know, you plant the seed in there, you're excited. But after a while, when you see no progress, when you don't see nothing sprout up, but you don't know what's taking place underneath in the ground. Like you don't know what's taking place inside of you. You know, beauty, self-love, and all that is not always on the outside. You may not see no progress, but if you continue to go forward, eventually those generational curses going to drop. You know, eventually those bad habits going to drop. All of that's going to drop because you're not focused on that. If you can put your mindset on being that person that God told you to be, you know, you don't really have too much time to think about the negative because you got so much positive and you fed your mind so much positivity on what you're going to be. You speaking to yourself that you really don't have time to dwell on the bad. So it's just like I can truly say that when I was in the world, you know, the role models I did look up to, you know, it was poor. You know, it was a poor mindset to have. And so it's just like now I can cherish everything. I don't regret anything that I've been through because honestly, it's keeping me. And now just looking back, I'm just like, wow, God, I'm worth so much more. See, God's thoughts is not ours. How God see me, I may not see myself that way. So when God said I'm worth all of this, it's just like I didn't even see myself that valuable. When I first came into the church, I knew I was valuable. But like, wow, I didn't know like, you know, I was that valuable. Like my price is far above rubies. What? Like, wow, it was mind-blowing. And, you know, God said that. God created me and you. So it's just like, if he said it, then I believe it. Ooh, God said I'm that, you know? So learning from the person who created you, you know, going off of what he given you, it can truly help you because it sure enough helped me. Now being in the church, striving to be a virtuous woman, y'all, just being honest, it was a struggle breaking my other routine, you know, of what I was doing. And then, you know, just going based off of what Sunday school, you know, Apostle was teaching us. He was like, time, you know, and I'm saying to myself, like, Alexis, you say you love yourself, okay? If you love yourself, you're going to respect time because you don't like your time being wasted. So you really going to respect time. So I was saying to myself, in order for me to be that woman of God, I'm going to have to respect time. And, you know, hearing that, you know, I'm getting poured into. And another thing with self-love, you cannot be around people that don't value themselves. They're not going to know how to value you. You know, so on that journey, I had to break away and, even though it was a lonely process then, it was good for me because I didn't know how to not be alone. I always had to have somebody around me. So it's just like being alone taught me that, wow, Alexis, you really not that bad at all. You ain't bad at all, girl. You lit. Like, girl, I started finding out who I really was. I was so used to being another person that I forgot that I liked to draw. I forgot myself, like, because I hid myself for so long that I started doing things that I genuinely love. Like, wow, Alexis, you like to write. You're writing poems. Like, I used to write. Like, I'm going back to how I really was. Like, because when you're so used to doing something like breaking a bad habit, you can do something for 21 days and then it become a habit. And it don't necessarily have to be something bad. It can be you did it for so long that now you're used to it. It's in your routine. And sometimes it's normal to you, whether it's good or bad. So the same thing, if you can create a bad habit within 21 days, you can create a good one in 21 days. It's just like, it may be hard. Like, I hear it all the time, yes, it's going to be hard. I mean, I don't be trying to sound hard or anything, but sometimes in life, things are going to be hard, but it's not impossible. So if it's hard, then obviously God knew that I can do it, because if it was impossible, then I knew I couldn't do it, because I serve a God that does the impossible, because that's not our job to do the impossible. So yes, it's going to be hard. Yes, it's going to be a battle. Yes, you're going to fall. But guess what? Like, it's not the end. But if you can get up and brush yourself off again and, truly believe, like, when I tell you everything is in God's word, we tend to go out and we tend to go search and seek through everyone else, and we mess around and get counsel that's not godly counsel, and it messes us up. And then we take in that, and we may not be so far gone, but we take that little advice, and you may not, do what they said right away, but it's still in the back of your head, and it don't mean you no good. And one day you might just act upon it. I know, because I did it. I started acting upon that advice, and I didn't see myself so far gone to the point where one day I literally woke up depressed. Like, listen, I knew I was feeling like a failure before, but this type of depression was so heavy on me that I can be anywhere and I'll be crying in silence because I was disgusted with who I was, all because I was listening to advice that did not mean me no good. So if you do want to, start a self-love journey, I will say, you can do it. It's never too late. I'll say, know where you at in life. Literally, look at yourself, examine yourself, figure out who you are at that very moment. Do not lie to yourself, because sometimes we know that we know good, and we'll sit up here and we'll sugarcoat where we're at, but you're not going to really get the help you need. Because if you're lying to yourself, then you want others to lie to you. And honestly, I don't want nobody to lie to me. Keep it real with me, so you got to keep it real with yourself. So, okay, examine where you're at, okay? Look at your surroundings and try to put yourself in an atmosphere that's going to better you. Before I came into church, I'm just using me as an example because I went through it. Like, I was so used to being around, people who smoke weed, this, that, and the third. I didn't have no vehicle. I didn't, have no way, but I just was like, okay, I have 2 feet. I was like, I'm going to go walking. I'm going to clear my mind. I'm going to meditate on something different. I'm finna ride the bus. I went downtown. I hated reading growing up. I mean, I literally would read something and my mind would just forget what I just read. But I was so used to not reading that I had to force myself to read. So even if I would read a whole page and literally forgot what I just read, I keep reading until I grasped onto it. And I was saying to myself, I have to better myself. In order to feed me, I'm going to have to better myself. So on this journey, it is going to be a fight. It's going to be hard. But you're going to look back, and not only this self-love journey going to help you, it's going to help you in life. It's not just going to help you love yourself. It's going to help you in life. It's going to help you learn that stuff don't just come overnight. So if I'm going to leave you with something in my conclusion, I would say to you that you can make it. Listen, I don't care what you did I wasn't always like this, literally. I mean, I'm not perfect now. I'm striving to be, a better person every day. I fall. Yes, I do. But guess what? Forgive yourself, brush yourself off again, and try to learn from your mistakes. So you can do it. And if you want advice, as I always say, you can inbox me. I'm open ears. Like, I've been there. I may not have the same story as you, but if we're trying to have the same outcome of loving ourselves, I can relate to you, sis. So, hit me up, And so I just hope everyone enjoy the